Right, so let's take a detailed look on what we've got going along here. It's got some nice check-in, it's got tons of classic mojo. Check-in is just fabulous. It's got the original stop tail piece. The knob there is bent by the looks of it. The celluloid pick guard is in pretty nasty shape. The bridge is not original. That's a Gibson ABR1, and that's a vintage modification, I believe, that was very popular. It's direct mounted into the body. That's a Hylotron Gretsch original pickup. I've no idea if it functions or any of the electronics function at all. Some great checking around here as well. I just love the mojo on this thing. Strap lock buttons missing there. The neck looks pretty straight. There's some divots in the cowboy cord area, but they don't look to be that deep actually. So let's just talk about what's on the headstock first. We've got two nylock nuts on there, going all the way through with Phillips head screws. Logo's still nicely intact. Some good checking on there too. These two tuners are, I'm told, Gibson SG stainless steel tuners from the 70s, I believe. These are Clusen Deluxes. What we should have on here are two strips of Waverley 3+3 tuners. So let's flip it over. Looks pretty good on the back. It's got some really cool wear lines to it. Not too much buckle rash. It's got a set neck, of course. These were quite high quality instruments. The truss rod is still there. It looks to be in reasonably good order. So there you are. That's the project. So the first job is to really start looking at this headstock, to strip it down, take all the non-original parts off there, see what the integrity of this material is. I believe that this piece on here is slightly loose, so I'm going to take the screws out, wash it with acetone and see if that dissolves the glue. If it doesn't, then it's going to be a hot water steam type situation if it's an organic type of glue. And then wire brush with the grain, clean everything out, and take it from there. Okay, so the next job is to start cleaning this up. I've stripped it down. I've left the ferrules in because I don't know if I try to push those out whether it's going to open up one of the wounds. Anyway, so I'm going to use acetone and I'm going to brush along the grain in this direction and see what comes off and what stays on. And I'll be holding it upright with my other hand so that the acetone won't spread, and because that it will destroy the paint that's already on there. So just use gravity to work with it. Okay, so neither acetone or glue remover, which is mostly acetone anyway, has removed this glue, so I'm going to conclude that it's organic. So I'm going to try heat and steam and see if that moves it. Okay, so after trying acetone and glue remover that didn't work, I decided that I would not go with the hot water approach because it might just be causing too much damage. And the only section that's glued right now is this piece here, and then it's glued around there. And it seems to be on there really, really well. So I'm going to leave it on there and route through this whole section to put splints in anyway. So I've cleaned up the end of the neck and gone for a rough fitting. There's a fair bit of distortion. So I've managed to get it where it fits correctly, but I do have gaps. And because of the older type glue that I've removed, I've managed to remove pretty much all the glue from this. But there's still these fragments left in here. I think I'm going to use epoxy because that's going to be a safe bet rather than try and Titebond to another type of glue, or an organic glue to another type of glue. I know epoxy will work, and also epoxy has some good pore filling, or rather gap filling properties. So the next job will be to mask up the truss rod to make sure I don't get any glue on that. So I'm about ready to set it up now. I put some wax on the truss rod and also put some heat shrink over the top of it and shrunk it down. I used a little bit of super glue to get into some loose spots underneath, because I could control that. So when I put the epoxy on top, it's not going to go right the way through and grab onto the truss rod. So I'll set this into position with some slow cure epoxy. I use this stuff from Stumac. And so the whole idea of epoxying it together is that I've got a solid base that I can work my router across without it moving. This is heat shrink that I've put on the truss rod thread to protect it. And I've kept away from that as much as possible when I put it together with the epoxy, because I didn't want to obviously glue that thread into the channel. I'll flip it over. So yeah, it's looking like a guitar again, and it's nice and solid. That epoxy is really strong. I would normally use Titebond Red, but in this case, because there were so many voids and things to fill, epoxy was really my only option. Plus there was some older glue residue in there that wasn't coming out with acetone and a steel brush. So I decided to play it safe. So now I'm going to start setting up my router table, and I'm going to mount this face down onto a board and build up a router surface around it. So that's my next step. So this is what I'm going to be using for my surface, what I'm going to strap the guitar face down to, and it's 3/4 MDF. It's really stable, almost perfectly flat, which is really good for this job. So I'm going to mount that face down. I'm going to put some cushion in between here so I don't rest it all on the nut, and I'm going to shim out the back so that it all stays flat on the fretboard, and the body will be up at a slight angle, and I will shim underneath the body so that it's stable. So just quickly, you can see that I've cut a piece of 1/4 plywood there and taped it to the neck to protect the nut and the frets. Right, so this is my basic router table base, if you like. Through the peg head are 2 cabinet screws going into another piece of 3/4. They're not ramped down tight, they're just to hold this flat. This is automotive tubing. Obviously with nitrocellulose you want to put plenty of masking tape, good quality masking tape that's not going to ruin your finish if you leave it on there too long. So they're clamping this face down, and then behind the back I just simply fold up a towel, wedge it a few times, fold the top over, fill up the gap, wedge it a little bit more, and what we've got here is a good solid base to start building up the correct level to run the router on to do my cuts. And here we are, you can see I've completed some routing. So just simply build up this make a table, just build it up in layers to the height you need so that you can run your router to the length that you want to make those splines. I've got a nice flat base and this is my fence for cutting this one, because a lot of people put the splines in at an angle, but this was so damaged that I wanted to go right the way through into the headstock, get the deepest possible splines and the thickest too. I've got nice thick 3/8 splines I'm going to put in there. And yeah, so that's turned out pretty well. I have these screws in there so that you can check that you're completely level, and you can alter those to hold it exactly in the right place when you cut your splines. That's always a good idea. So now I'm going to cut my splines. This is a piece of African quarter sawn mahogany. I'm going to align my table saw blade with the grain. So I'm going to cut my splines so that they're dead vertical. And the process is to cut them so they're a little bit tight and then sand them down to shape. I'll go more into that. And so here are my fillets, my inserts, and they're cut about 1/16 over. I'd like them a little closer, but it's pretty difficult to do that on the table saw. So now they'll be sanded to the correct width. And so I've got a 100 grade grit, and it's spray glued to a short piece of MDF. And the way to do this is you go like 1, 2, 3, 4, spin it around, 1, 2, 3, 4, flip it over, same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, spin it around, 1, 2, 3, 4, until you get to a fit that's not a force, just a nice fit with some friction, but you're not pushing things apart. So here they are, sanded down to thickness. I also use a digital vernier gauge as well, or caliper, I think some people call them. And you can just check that you're not taking too much off of one side than another. So the fit you want is it fits in there just nicely and without too much effort. You can pull it up and down with some friction. Right, so to talk a little bit about how to get that circular profile on the end, what I do is I've got this 3/8 caul or punch. You can use the end of a drill bit, and I put it over the block and then push it right up to the end and trace the shape on there. And then I sand it with the shoe shine method, which is, you know, like the old shoe shiners. You rubber strip backwards and forwards over the top, to and fro, you know, obviously a hand both sides, until you get that circle. And then, so you do one side first, and you're leaving extra on the end there that you haven't done yet. And once you get this profile good on the highest point, then you can make a mark on the back of this to know where to cut it, but leave a little bit of spare, and so you can shoe shine it down until it's the right shape to fit. And then you just trial and error a little bit, fit it, take it off, try it again, sand it a little bit more. And when you glue these in, Titebond Original is what we use for wood to wood contact, because it doesn't have any plasticizers or anything like that, and it's a hard resin type set that you get with it. So here's a coloured wood filler that I like to use. So I get the correct colour stain that I want, or dye, and this is mahogany, African mahogany sawdust. So I put it in a container first, and then mix in some denatured alcohol, and then throw the sawdust in and mix it up and let it all evaporate and dry. You can't put the stain directly into the sawdust, it just clumps. So anyway, once this is dry, you can mix that in with either Titebond Original, or put it in a hole and use super glue, or you can mix it in with epoxy. And there it is, mixed in with slow cure epoxy. Spreads nicely, like jam. And there's a good working time with this as well. So as you can see, I'm taking down the inserts, the splines, and I use this file. It's got rough on one side and fine on the other. Love this thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a little recess in here, and in there I'm going to run my epoxy filler mix that I showed you how to make earlier. And I'll have to clean all that out first, all traces of Titebond, and get a nice key in there first so that it'll be nice and solid. And then when that sets up, then I can profile the whole thing. I have a couple of spots on the side that I'm going to need to use it on too, but I'll do that afterwards because I'm going to need gravity to help me. So there you can see I've cleaned out a nice little trough. You should key up nicely in there. I'm going to put my epoxy, my coloured epoxy mix in there, which, to remind you, is dyed mahogany shavings mixed with epoxy. So there's the epoxy mixture floating in there. I just tickled it with a hot gun to level it out. That should set up nicely, and then I'll carry on profiling. I know it's not an exact match, but it's a step in the right direction, and it will cut down on the amount of shellac and dye that I have to apply to get it close. So with this epoxy set up, what I want to do now is to level this out, and I like to use like a broad flat file, motions from side to side, and then take the file to skim this way like so. So I want a level surface there, and then I'll take it down from there with a mixture of the shoe shine method with strips of sandpaper and semicircular files. So as you can see, we're getting there. To sand it down to this level, I've used mainly files and a knife blade to scrape. One handy tip, if you get like a low area and higher areas either side, if you've got a very fine long file and you bridge the two areas to bring it down to the lower area. Next thing I'm going to do is to rub some dye directly into that, so that'll help me later on when I'm trying to blend it in. And there you can see there's some dye rubbed in, and I use a Scotch pad, one of the purple Scotch pads, and then the Stumac dye, and just rub that in for a bit. So I've got the back pretty close to where I want it, and I'm going to turn over and start on the front next. When I get really close and there's just a few like little marks that you're trying to hide around things, I find that this gel type super glue works really well. I mean, this is like, it's less than $5 for a 3-pack from Harbour Freight, but it's a thick gel. Put a blob on and rub it in there. Nice, smooth it in there. You can like work it in. You might want to wear a glove to do that, but I do it with my bare fingers and then wash my finger with acetone. I'm sure it's not very good for me. So anyway, next I'm going to go and start on the front, and I'm going to level out those two splines with files to start with. So I've got the splines down level. Now I'm going to try and level out this surface a little bit better. So what I've got to get in there and do is key up all the stuff that's glossy so it will take the filler. At the moment I'm just trying to decide whether I'm going to use epoxy or super glue actually. Obviously I can't use traditional fillers because I've already got epoxy on the surface. So the super glue, the gel super glue, works really well as kind of last stage filler. And I've put a thin coat of shellac on top of this just to protect it. And now I'll be going over to the headstock some more. I've got the shape pretty much there, and I'm using the gel super glue in there just to take out some of the low spots. So with cleaning up this headstock, I'm being very careful, and I'm just using saliva and a cotton bud like they do in the art world. Especially around a transfer, you don't want this thing lifting or flaking really badly. You can see that dirt coming off. I really don't want to make this guitar look restored. I want to keep it as natural with all the wear and the bumps and the patina, as much of that as I possibly can. Look at that. Going to get through a lot of cotton buds because that's not going back in my mouth. And just take your time, and it's very, very cathartic. You know, it's relaxing and much better than watching crap on the TV or YouTube. There are natural enzymes in saliva that break down and work like a detergent and lift the dirt out, and that's what's going on. Okay, that'll lead me to it. Okay, so when we left it, I was leveling up the face of the headstock here, and I got it exactly how I wanted it, and then I went about aging it. So what I did exactly was, after the super glue, you needed to put like a primer on that for the black nitrocellulose, and I used shellac for that. And then I sprayed in some black nitro over the shellac. And then I wanted to get texture, because this was all pretty and gleaming, and I really didn't want that. So a trick I use is to spray some shellac over the top, use a scalpel to put some checking in, and then get your heat gun out and just fizz the shellac. It's like a fizzing action when it gets the heat on it. And you don't have to wait ages for it to cure. You can do it like 10 minutes after you put it on, but put it on thin, and rather do it like in 2 or 3 coats than just one. And then I blew back some black nitrocellulose on the top to bring it back to black again. The tuner bushings didn't work for the tuners I wanted to fit. I actually sourced the original tuners and these hex bushings from eBay. Actually the same year as well, so I was really, really lucky then. The truss rod cover is a modern one, and I just scuffed it up a lot and then gave it some amber shellac. I'll flip it over. So there are the Waverley 1964 63 Waverley tuners, and they got that knurl pattern, the 2 lines down the middle. That's really hard to find those. Usually they're just plain there, but this definitely had those. And then on the back you can see I gave it some clear nitrocellulose over the top of the shellac that was on there, and gave it a rubbed in, worn look. And I'm pretty pleased with that. I think it looks pretty nice. You can still see the splines, but I mean, that's fine. It just proves that it was done properly. So I'm okay with that. So I strung her up. Before I put the strings on, I made a template for my pick guard. And the way I did that was to put some broken toothpicks in all the holes, and then put all my broken pieces, aligned them with, put a sheet of paper on the top, pushing it through the toothpicks, and then put all my broken pieces on top of that, aligning with the toothpicks with the pick guard screws, and then drew around for a paper template, and I'll spray glue that onto the back of a piece of pick guard material when it arrives. And put the pickup back in, no problems there. The ABR one, it actually intonates perfectly. I couldn't believe it. and the guitar has been sitting overnight and it's still perfectly in tune. Like the neck is like dead straight. Really, really happy with that. So when the pick guard comes and I make it, I'll look at soldering up the electronics, because you can't just sit them in there because they're too high to mess around with the pick guard. So here's the pick guard material, 3-ply, black, white, black. Here's the template I made. This still has the plastic coating on it that you peel off. So I'm going to stick my template straight on top so I can cut it out with a jigsaw. So there it is stuck down. I'm going to use quite a skinny blade so I can work the angles. And I'm just going to go really, really slow. I'll probably run it on a slow speed as well. And there it is cut out. It was pretty easy. I'm going to use files now to get the shape exactly right. And then I'm going to drill the holes. And I'm going to countersink the screws by getting a screw from behind, pushing it into the hole and then pulling it while rotating the drill. I've heard that works. So there it is cut with the holes, and now I'm going to do the countersinking. And I've just found out that actually if you put a Phillips screwdriver bit, a number 2, in the drill and go on low speed, you can create that countersink. So I noticed on the original there's a very slight bevel. So I'm going to do that with a fresh craft Stanley blade. Put a slight angle on there. And there it is, all nice and pretty with the chamfered edge. And now the bit I really like is I'm going to mess it all up with this red Scotch pad. Now I've got it looking just about right. I'm going to age it with some amber shellac mixture that I keep especially for this kind of job. Basically going to rub it on, rub it on and rub it off.